IAP. For weeks, whispers of a growing fracture between King Charles and Prince William echoed through palace corridors, threatening to overshadow the fragile stability of the monarchy itself. Then, without warning, father and son appeared side by side before the cameras, measured, composed, almost defiant. But insiders insist the carefully staged unity concealed a far more chilling truth. The coronation dispute that nearly tore the House of Windsor apart had not disappeared. It had merely gone underground. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What made the sudden appearance so unsettling was not the smiles, nor the carefully controlled gestures exchanged between the king and his heir. It was the timing. For nearly 2 months, reports had circulated through royal circles describing what palace staff allegedly called a period of icy silence between Clarence House and Kensington Palace. Meetings were said to have been shortened. Trusted aides were reportedly excluded from key discussions. Even long-established royal correspondents began hinting that communication between Charles and William had become unusually formal, almost transactional, during one of the most delicate moments of the monarchy's modern history. According to various interpretations of private palace briefings, the disagreement centered on something far more explosive than simple family tension. At the heart of the divide were confidential conversations regarding the future structure of the monarchy itself. Sources close to senior royal households suggest Prince William had become increasingly determined to accelerate plans for a streamlined royal institution, while King Charles, despite his ongoing health challenges, remained deeply protective of the traditional framework he had waited more than 7 decades to inherit. And within the sacred machinery of the crown, even the smallest disagreement about authority can quickly become a constitutional earthquake. Insiders whisper that tensions escalated dramatically during a closed-door strategy session held just days before the public appearance that stunned royal watchers across Britain. Palace administrative streams, ranging from security scheduling leaks to whispers among senior household staff, allegedly pointed toward a disagreement involving future coronation protocols, ceremonial responsibilities, and the balance of influence between the current king and the future one. While no official details were ever released, several royal commentators quietly noted that the atmosphere surrounding both households had changed almost overnight. Then came the public event itself. To the outside world, it appeared flawless. King Charles stood composed despite visible signs of physical exhaustion, while Prince William remained disciplined and calm beside him. But body language experts immediately began dissecting every subtle movement: the delayed eye contact, the restrained posture, the measured distance between them during several key moments. Reports suggest senior aides spent days choreographing the appearance in an effort to project unity, after fears began spreading that divisions within the House of Windsor were becoming impossible to conceal. And perhaps most alarming of all was the growing sense among palace insiders that the monarchy's internal stability had quietly entered dangerous territory. Royal historians began drawing comparisons to past succession tensions that once threatened to fracture the institution from within. Different interior, interpretations of the situation described Charles as deeply wounded by suggestions that his reign should begin surrendering authority sooner than expected, particularly while he continues to battle illness behind closed doors. Meanwhile, William reportedly believed the monarchy needed urgent modernization if it hoped to survive a rapidly changing public climate. Neither side appeared willing to fully retreat. The emotional weight of the conflict reportedly rippled far beyond private meetings. Courtiers loyal to Charles allegedly feared that accelerating William's influence too quickly could weaken the authority of the reigning monarch during a vulnerable period. At the same time, supporters within William's circle were said to be increasingly frustrated by what they viewed as delays, hesitation, and resistance from the old guard surrounding the king. The result was an atmosphere described by some insiders as deeply tense, with palace staff walking carefully through a royal household suddenly divided by competing visions of the future. Yet despite the whispers, despite the speculation, and despite the carefully buried reports of confrontation, the palace moved aggressively to suppress any appearance of crisis. Senior aides reportedly worked around the clock to contain leaks before the highly scrutinized joint appearance took place. Royal commentators from publications including The Times and Tatler noted the unusual intensity of internal coordination surrounding what should have been a routine public engagement. Why would such extraordinary measures be necessary unless something far more serious was unfolding behind closed doors? And that is precisely where the deeper anxiety began to emerge. Because according to those familiar with the situation, the public reunion was never truly about reconciliation. It was about survival. The monarchy could not afford visible division while King Charles remained physically weakened, and global attention increasingly shifted toward Prince William's future role. Every smile, every handshake, every carefully staged moment carried the weight of preserving confidence in an institution built entirely on perception, discipline, and continuity. But the public reunion was only the surface, because the real battle centered on who would shape the monarchy after Charles. It was never supposed to become public. According to multiple royal and emerged from insiders, the dispute began during confidential planning meetings tied to the monarchy's long-term future. What started as disagreements over ceremonial authority allegedly evolved into something far more dangerous: a silent struggle over power, influence, and the future identity of the crown itself. In the days following the carefully orchestrated public reunion between King Charles and Prince William, palace officials moved swiftly to reinforce the illusion of stability. Briefings emphasized unity. Royal aides quietly reassured journalists that the monarchy remained focused, disciplined, and fully aligned behind the king. But behind the heavy doors of royal residences, a very different reality was reportedly unfolding. Sources familiar with internal discussions claim the conflict between father and son had already progressed far beyond personal tension. It had become a battle over what the monarchy itself should look like in the years ahead. According to reports circulating among senior royal commentators, Prince William had been pressing more aggressively for what insiders described as a slimmed-down monarchy, a modernized institution built around fewer senior royals, tighter financial structures, and a more direct connection with the public. The strategy, while popular with some younger advisors, allegedly alarmed several members of the old guard surrounding King Charles. For Charles, whose entire life had been shaped by centuries of royal tradition, the idea of rapidly dismantling ceremonial structures reportedly felt less like modernization and more like erosion. And that is where the tension deepened. Various interpretations of confidential strategy meetings suggest William's expanding influence inside palace operations became a growing source of unease within the king's inner circle. Some insiders claim the prince had gradually assumed a larger role in discussions tied to future constitutional planning, particularly as Charles continued managing the physical strain of ongoing cancer treatment. While no official confrontation was ever acknowledged publicly, whispers from palace administrative streams describe moments of visible frustration behind closed doors as competing visions for the crown collided. For William, reports suggest the urgency came from fear that the monarchy could lose public trust if it failed to evolve quickly enough. Fear that younger generations were becoming increasingly disconnected from royal tradition. And perhaps most critically, fear that any sign of institutional weakness during Charles's illness could trigger deeper questions about the monarchy's long-term survival. Sources close to Kensington Palace claim William viewed reform not as rebellion, but as protection. Yet within the deeply hierarchical structure of the royal family, even well-intentioned reform can easily be interpreted as challenge. King Charles, however, reportedly saw the matter through a far more personal lens. Having waited decades to ascend the throne, he was allegedly unwilling to surrender symbolic authority while still serving as reigning monarch. Several royal historians quietly pointed toward the immense shadow of Queen Elizabeth II hanging over every discussion. Her reign had been defined by continuity, patience, and unwavering commitment to tradition. Those familiar with Charles's thinking suggest he believed preserving that legacy required caution, not acceleration. And so the divide widened. Soon, senior courtiers themselves reportedly began separating into rival camps. Some aligned more closely with William's mother, stern vision for the future. Others remained fiercely loyal to Charles and the institutional structures inherited from the late Queen. Palace insiders whisper that certain meetings became so tense aides were instructed to limit documentation and avoid discussing sensitive matters over unsecured communications. The atmosphere, according to multiple interpretations, shifted from disagreement into quiet political warfare conducted beneath the polished surface of royal protocol. What made the situation especially volatile was timing. Charles's health challenges had already intensified public scrutiny around succession, stability, and leadership inside the House of Windsor. Every appearance by the king was analyzed for signs of weakness. Every increased responsibility handed to William triggered fresh speculation about transition. Palace officials reportedly feared that even minor leaks regarding internal disagreements could spiral into a damaging narrative of instability at the very moment the monarchy needed confidence most. Then came the confidential strategy session that insiders now describe as the true breaking point. Though exact details remain heavily guarded, sources claim tensions escalated sharply after discussions surrounding future ceremonial authority and long-term restructuring plans. Some interpretations suggest voices were raised. Others insist the confrontation remained cold, restrained, and deeply formal. But nearly every account agrees on one thing. After that meeting, the emotional distance between Charles and William became impossible for palace staff to ignore. And while the palace projected calm, insiders claimed the emotional fallout inside the royal family became impossible to ignore. Long before headlines exploded across British tabloids, palace staff reportedly sensed the atmosphere had changed. Meetings became shorter, security arrangements shifted, and according to whispers circulating through Kensington Palace, even longtime aides began avoiding discussions involving the king and his heir. At first, the changes seemed subtle enough to dismiss. A postponed briefing here, an unexpectedly shortened luncheon there. But inside the tightly controlled world of the royal household, even the smallest disruption can send shockwaves through an institution built entirely on routine, symbolism, and discipline. Sources familiar with palace operation claim staff members began quietly noticing unusual patterns in the weeks following confidential strategy meetings that reportedly intensified tensions between King Charles and Prince William. Conversations stopped when certain officials entered rooms. Scheduling teams allegedly received last-minute instructions with no explanation. And beneath the polished silence of royal protocol, anxiety slowly began spreading through the corridors of power. According to multiple palace insiders, one of the first alarming signs involved the sudden cancellation of several private dinners traditionally held between Charles and William. These meetings, usually viewed as essential moments of coordination between monarch and heir, were reportedly removed from schedules without clarification. Some aides allegedly interpreted the cancellations as temporary adjustments linked to the king's health treatment. Others feared something far more serious was unfolding behind closed doors. Because within royal circles, silence itself often carries meaning. As speculation intensified internally, senior aides were reportedly instructed to maintain what one source described as strict discretion regarding all matters involving communication between Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace. Different interpretations suggest certain staff members were even advised to avoid discussing sensitive royal scheduling matters outside designated channels. Palace administrative streams, ranging from transportation coordination to security briefings, allegedly became more compartmentalized than usual. The result was an atmosphere that insiders quietly described as tense, cautious, and increasingly fragile. Outside palace walls, the public remained largely unaware of the growing discomfort behind the scenes. But royal correspondents began noticing something unusual. Charles and William were appearing separately more often. Events that traditionally featured both monarch and heir suddenly involved only one of them. Public messaging became carefully restrained. Even royal commentators known for avoiding controversy started hinting that something felt different within the senior ranks of the monarchy. Then came the body language analysis. It may sound trivial to outsiders, but within the relentless world of royal scrutiny, every glance and gesture becomes part of a larger narrative. Experts dissect brief interactions between father and son during public appearances, pointing to restrained posture, measured smiles, and moments of visible emotional distance. Reports suggest palace aides grew increasingly frustrated as social media speculation exploded, fueling rumors of deeper fractures inside the House of Windsor. The palace refused to address the growing whispers directly, but that silence only intensified public curiosity. Behind closed doors, courtiers reportedly became deeply concerned about the possibility of damaging leaks. Some feared that if details of the internal disagreements emerged publicly, while Charles continued battling health challenges, confidence in the monarchy could suffer lasting damage. Others worried about history repeating itself. Comparisons quietly surfaced to previous royal tensions that once consumed earlier generations of the Windsor family moments, when private disputes evolved into public crises capable of shaking the institution itself. According to various interpretations from those familiar with palace culture, the emotional strain was becoming increasingly difficult to contain. Staff members allegedly noticed growing exhaustion among seniors, advisors attempting to balance loyalty to the reigning monarch while simultaneously preparing for William's expanding future role. Some insiders described an invisible divide forming within royal households, not through open hostility, but through uncertainty. No one appeared fully certain where authority was shifting, or how quickly events behind closed doors might escalate further. And perhaps most troubling of all was the growing realization that the monarchy's greatest vulnerability was no longer coming from outside criticism, media attacks, or political pressure. It was emerging from within the institution itself. The fear was not simply about disagreement between father and son. It was about what those disagreements represented: two competing visions of monarchy colliding at the exact moment stability mattered most. Yet while tension continued building behind palace walls, another figure inside the royal family was quietly beginning to step forward. Unlike the courtiers leaking whispers or the advisors fighting for influence, this royal understood that the survival of the monarchy depended not on choosing sides, but on preventing the fracture from becoming irreversible. Behind the scenes, another figure was quietly attempting to keep the monarchy from spiraling into open conflict. As tensions reportedly intensified between father and son, Princess Catherine emerged as the calm center of an increasingly fragile institution. Sources close to royal circles suggest her private interventions may have prevented the disagreement from becoming a full-scale constitutional embarrassment. At a moment when uncertainty seemed to be spreading through every layer of the royal household, Catherine reportedly became one of the few figures capable of moving between both worlds without deepening the divide. While senior aides worried about protocol, media leaks, and internal loyalties, the Princess of Wales was said to be focused on something far more urgent: preserving unity before the emotional fractures inside the monarchy became impossible to repair. And according to multiple insiders familiar with the atmosphere surrounding both Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace, her role during those tense weeks became far more significant than the public was ever allowed to see. Reports suggest Catherine quietly positioned herself as an informal bridge between King Charles and Prince William during a period when direct communication allegedly grew strained. Unlike palace advisors whose words could easily be interpreted as political maneuvering, Catherine reportedly carried a different kind of influence, one built on trust, restraint, and an understanding of how fragile the monarchy had become beneath its polished exterior. Various interpretations from royal insiders describe her approach as deeply deliberate, never confrontational, never dramatic, but quietly persistent in steering conversations away from escalation. What made her influence especially powerful was the emotional contrast surrounding her. While headlines focused on institutional tensions and speculation about royal power struggles, Catherine continued projecting calm discipline during public engagements. Palace insiders claim appearances involving senior royals were carefully coordinated during this period to minimize rumors of division. Seating arrangements, timing, and messaging were reportedly scrutinized with extraordinary precision. Yet amid all the calculated planning, many observers began noticing that Catherine consistently remained the stabilizing presence at the center. Of it all. According to those familiar with palace dynamics, Prince William himself allegedly leaned heavily on Catherine during the most difficult moments of the internal dispute. Sources close to Kensington Palace claim the pressure surrounding his expanding responsibilities, combined with fears over his father's health, created immense emotional strain behind closed doors. But where William's frustration reportedly intensified at times, Catherine was said to encourage patience, caution, and discipline. Some insiders even described her as one of the only people capable of persuading William to step back when tensions with palace officials became dangerously heated. Royal commentators quietly began drawing comparisons to Queen Elizabeth II and her legendary ability to preserve institutional calm during moments of crisis. Not because Catherine wielded formal power in the same way, but because she reportedly understood something fundamental about the monarchy itself. Perception is survival. Different interpretations from royal historians suggest Catherine recognized that any visible fracture between Charles and William could trigger a public confidence crisis far larger than a Maple family disagreement. And so while others focused on strategy and authority, she focused on maintaining emotional equilibrium within the family itself. There were also growing concerns inside palace walls about Catherine's enormous importance to public confidence in the monarchy. Her popularity with the British public had steadily transformed her into one of the institution's most trusted figures. Senior courtiers reportedly understood that at a time when Charles's health remained under scrutiny and William faced mounting pressure as future king, Charles was not yet king. Catherine's composure had become politically invaluable. Insiders whisper that palace officials viewed her not simply as the Princess of Wales, but as a crucial safeguard against instability. And yet, even as she attempted to preserve peace behind the scenes, the emotional burden surrounding the royal family continued intensifying. Reports suggest Catherine became increasingly aware that the conflict between Charles and William was no longer driven solely by personality or disagreement. It was being fueled by something far heavier: fear about the future, fear about succession, fear about public trust, and above all, fear about me. The monarchy truly had to prepare for what might come next. Because despite the palace's relentless efforts to project strength, concern surrounding King Charles's health was becoming impossible to separate from the wider tensions consuming the institution. Every postponed engagement, every adjusted schedule, every carefully managed appearance only deepened public speculation. And according to insiders, even Catherine's steadying influence could not fully contain the growing anxiety spreading through royal circles as questions about the monarchy's future became louder with each passing week. Yet even Catherine's efforts could not completely stop the growing fears surrounding the king's health and the monarchy's uncertain future. Behind every whisper about royal tension stood a far more uncomfortable reality. King Charles's declining health had accelerated conversations the palace was never prepared to confront publicly. And with every new appearance, speculation surrounding succession quietly intensified. For months, Buckingham Palace worked relentlessly to maintain an image of continuity and control. Official statements remained measured. Public schedules were carefully adjusted. Senior aides consistently emphasized that the king remained fully engaged in matters of state despite ongoing cancer treatment. But behind the polished language and disciplined appearances, an unmistakable sense of uncertainty had begun settling over the monarchy. Because no matter how carefully the institution managed perception, the question hanging over the House of Windsor was becoming impossible to ignore. What happens if the reign of King Charles becomes shorter than anyone expected? Reports suggest those fears quietly transformed the atmosphere inside royal circles. Every public appearance by the king carried enormous emotional weight, not simply because of his role as monarch, but because observers across Britain were now scrutinizing every gesture, every movement, and every sign of physical strain. Royal commentators began openly discussing the visible exhaustion surrounding Charles, while palace insiders allegedly grew increasingly anxious about how much pressure could realistically be placed upon him during such a fragile period. At the same time, Prince William's responsibilities reportedly began expanding in ways that felt both inevitable and deeply unsettling. To those closest to the institution. Sources familiar with palace operations claim William gradually assumed a larger ceremonial presence behind the scenes, stepping more frequently into duties traditionally handled directly by the monarch. What once appeared to be routine support for an aging king now started resembling quiet preparation for something much larger. And according to various interpretations within royal households, that shift carried enormous emotional consequences for both father and son. For Charles, insiders claim the situation became deeply personal. After waiting a lifetime to inherit the throne, he was now confronting the painful reality that illness threatened to overshadow the very reign he had spent decades preparing to fulfill. Reports suggest the king remained fiercely determined to maintain authority despite physical challenges, refusing to allow public concern over his health to define his monarchy. Palace officials allegedly admired his resilience, but privately worried about the immense toll the pressure was taking behind closed doors. Meanwhile, the burden on Prince William intensified with every passing week. Sources close to Kensington Palace claim The prince found himself trapped between loyalty to his father and the growing realization that the monarchy itself required urgent preparation for the future. The emotional contradiction was impossible to escape. William was expected to support the reigning king publicly while simultaneously preparing for the possibility that far greater responsibility could arrive sooner than anyone inside the family wanted to admit. That delicate balancing act only fueled wider fears of instability during one of the most sensitive constitutional moments Britain had faced in years. Royal historians quietly began comparing the atmosphere to earlier succession anxieties that once consumed previous generations of the monarchy. Some pointed to the uncertainty surrounding King George VI's declining health in the years before Queen Elizabeth II ascended the throne. Others described a deeper institutional fear that modern public scrutiny, amplified by non-stop media attention and social speculation, could turn private royal vulnerability into a national crisis almost overnight, and so the palace continued fighting to preserve calm. Public messaging focused heavily on continuity, duty, and stability. Biannual aides reportedly coordinated appearances with extraordinary precision to reassure the public that the monarchy remained steady, despite growing uncertainty behind the scenes. Yet according to insiders, even these efforts could not fully suppress the emotional tension spreading through royal households, because the deeper truth remained impossible to ignore. The monarchy was quietly entering a transition period before anyone was emotionally prepared for it. Some reports even suggest that within private conversations, discussions about the future became more direct than ever before. Not openly, not formally, but subtly, carefully. Questions surrounding succession planning, ceremonial responsibilities, and long-term leadership allegedly surfaced with increasing frequency as Charles's treatment continued. And with every new rumor, every delayed appearance, every carefully worded palace statement, public fascination only intensified further. Then, suddenly, everything changed. After weeks of speculation, silence, and growing concern, the palace made a move few had expected. At a moment when rumors of division and instability threatened to overwhelm the institution, King Charles and Prince William emerged together in a highly scrutinized appearance that immediately sent shockwaves through royal circles and beyond. Then came the appearance that stunned royal watchers everywhere the moment Charles and William stepped forward together. When King Charles and Prince William finally appeared together again, the symbolism was impossible to miss. Cameras captured smiles, polite exchanges, and carefully choreographed moments of unity. But according to royal insiders, every second of that appearance had been negotiated with extraordinary precision. After weeks of speculation surrounding tensions inside the House of Windsor, the public reunion immediately transformed into one of the most analyzed royal appearances in recent memory. Every movement carried meaning, every interaction was dissected, and behind the carefully measured calm presented to the world, sources suggest an enormous operation had quietly unfolded inside palace walls to ensure the moment projected exactly one message: stability. According to various interpretations from royal commentators and palace insiders, preparations for the joint appearance reportedly began days earlier amid growing concern that rumors surrounding Charles and William were spiraling beyond control. Senior aides allegedly feared that continued separation between monarch and heir would only intensify public speculation about division, succession, and instability at the very heart of the monarchy. In response, palace teams were said to have coordinated every detail with extraordinary caution, from scheduling arrangements to media positioning and public messaging. What made the appearance especially significant was timing. Public concern surrounding King Charles's health had already created a fragile atmosphere around the institution, and reports of internal disagreements only deepened anxiety. Palace officials reportedly understood that if father and son continued appearing distant from one another, the narrative surrounding the monarchy could shift from temporary uncertainty into something far more dangerous, a perception that the crown itself was becoming emotionally fractured during a critical constitutional period. And so the appearance became more than a simple royal engagement. It became an act of institutional preservation. Royal experts quickly interpreted the event as a deliberate display of continuity, between the current king and the future one. William, according to sources close to Kensington Palace, was allegedly determined to project absolute loyalty to his father despite weeks of growing tension behind closed doors. Insiders claim the prince understood the enormous stakes involved. Any visible sign of coldness or emotional distance would immediately dominate headlines across Britain and beyond, and so throughout the appearance, William reportedly maintained a disciplined focus on reinforcing public confidence in the monarchy rather than fueling further speculation. For King Charles, the pressure carried a different emotional weight. Reports suggest the king was deeply committed to appearing composed and physically resilient despite ongoing treatment and mounting scrutiny over his health. Palace insiders whisper that Charles viewed the joint appearance not only as a public duty, but as a personal statement that he remained firmly in control of both the monarchy and the future direction of the institution. Different interpretations from royal observers suggest his determination to Project Strength became especially intense in the hours leading up to the engagement. The pub. My ligand reaction was immediate and overwhelming. British media outlets flooded with analysis describing the appearance as either a powerful demonstration of unity or an expertly staged effort to suppress deeper problems behind the scenes. Social platforms erupted with debate as royal watchers scrutinized every interaction between father and son. Some viewers interpreted the event as proof that rumors of a serious royal rupture had been exaggerated. Others believed the controlled nature of the appearance only confirmed how severe tensions had quietly become. Yet despite the endless speculation, the strategy appeared to work at least temporarily. The appearance calmed growing fears that the relationship between Charles and William had deteriorated beyond repair. Palace officials reportedly felt a cautious sense of relief as headlines shifted away from crisis narratives and back toward themes of continuity and resilience. For a brief moment, the monarchy regained control of the story. But beneath that carefully restored calm, insiders claim the deeper conflict never truly disappeared, because the tension between Charles and William was never simply about personality or temporary disagreement. It reflected something far more profound: two different visions for how the monarchy should survive the modern era. And while the public saw unity standing side by side, those closest to the institution reportedly understood that many of the questions driving the conflict remained unresolved behind closed doors. Some royal historians even warned that appearances like this have long been part of the monarchy's survival instinct. During previous royal crises, carefully choreographed displays of unity often concealed private struggles far more serious than the public initially realized. The crown, after all, has always relied on perception as much as power, and in moments of vulnerability, symbolism can become its strongest defense. Still, insiders warn that the deeper struggle over the monarchy's future may be far from over. At the heart of the dispute lies a question larger than any single royal. What should the monarchy become in the years ahead? Behind palace walls, reports suggest competing visions for the future continue to shape every decision, every alliance, and every carefully controlled public moment. For all the speculation surrounding King Charles and Prince William, insiders insist the real conflict has never been purely personal. It is ideological. A battle between two different understandings of what the crown must become in order to survive the modern world. And according to those familiar with discussions unfolding quietly inside royal households, that divide has only deepened as public pressure surrounding the monarchy continues to grow. King Charles, reports suggest, remains deeply committed to preserving the ceremonial heart of the institution he spent his entire life preparing to inherit. Sources close to royal circles claim the king views tradition not as outdated symbolism, but as the very foundation of the monarchy's legitimacy. The rituals, the hierarchy, the pageantry, the carefully maintained structures surrounding the crown to Charles, these are not relics of another era. They are the threads holding together centuries of continuity. And after ascending the throne later in life than any monarch in British history, insiders whisper that he feels an almost personal obligation to protect those traditions from being dismantled too quickly. Prince William, however, reportedly sees the future through a different lens. Interpretations from palace insiders suggest the prince believes the monarchy cannot survive long-term without significant modernization. According to sources close to Kensington Palace, William has increasingly favored a more streamlined institution with reduced spending, fewer working royals, and a stronger focus on public accessibility. Supporters of his approach argue that the monarchy must evolve alongside the society it serves or risk becoming disconnected from younger generations already questioning its relevance. That difference in philosophy has reportedly created subtle but powerful divisions inside palace operations. Senior courtiers allegedly find themselves navigating two competing centers of influence, one anchored in preservation, the other pushing carefully toward transformation. Some advisors reportedly remain fiercely loyal to Charles's traditional approach, believing any rapid modernization could weaken the sacred mystique surrounding the crown. Others quietly align more closely with William's long-term vision, convinced that survival in the 21st century requires a monarchy that appears leaner, more practical, and more emotionally connected to the public. Sources suggest younger members of the royal household have also gravitated more naturally toward William's perspective, not openly, not politically, but through a growing recognition that public expectations surrounding the monarchy have fundamentally changed. Royal historians often point out that Queen Elizabeth II ruled during an era where distance reinforced authority. Today, however, visibility, relatability, and transparency increasingly shape public trust, and insiders claim William understands that shift more clearly than many within the older generation of royal advisors. The problem is that both visions carry risk. Those defending Charles's approach reportedly fear that excessive modernization could lead to a loss of traditional skills and ways of life, could slowly strip away the very mystique that gives the monarchy its enduring power. They warn that reducing ceremony, shrinking royal structures, or softening institutional boundaries too aggressively could leave the crown appearing diminished rather than strengthened. But supporters of William's strategy argue the opposite, that refusing to evolve may eventually create a monarchy viewed as detached, expensive, and increasingly out of touch with modern Britain. And all of this is unfolding while public support becomes more crucial to royal survival than ever before. According to multiple royal commentators, the monarchy now exists under a level of scrutiny previous generations never experienced. Every appearance becomes content. Every disagreement becomes speculation. Every silence becomes interpreted as strategy. Palace officials reportedly understand that visible division between Charles and William could permanently damage confidence in the institution at precisely the moment stability is most needed. That fear has quietly intensified the competition for influence inside royal circles. Courtiers allegedly maneuver carefully between competing priorities, aware that the future direction of the monarchy may already be taking shape behind closed doors. Some insiders describe an atmosphere of controlled tension where even routine decisions now carry symbolic meaning. Which engagements matter most? Which charities receive attention? Which voices gain access to the future king? Beneath the calm exterior of royal protocol, a larger struggle over legacy is quietly unfolding. And perhaps most haunting of all is the realization that time itself may be accelerating. I asked these conflicts faster than anyone inside the palace ever anticipated. Because while Charles fights to preserve the institution he inherited, William is already being forced to prepare for the institution he may soon inherit himself. The result is a monarchy caught between past and future, tradition and survival, continuity and reinvention. And as the palace fights to preserve stability, one haunting reality continues to loom over everything. For now, the cameras see unity, the palace projects calm, and King Charles and Prince William stand together beneath the weight of centuries-old tradition. But royal insiders quietly warn that beneath the carefully managed image lies a fragile piece held together by duty, fear, and the desperate need to protect the crown from itself. In public, the monarchy has regained its composure. Appearances remain disciplined. Statements are measured with almost surgical precision. Father and son continue carrying out engagements beneath the familiar language of continuity and service, presenting the image of a royal institution fully united during one of the most uncertain periods of modern royal history. Yet according to sources familiar with private P.I.L.S. dynamics, the calm now surrounding the House of Windsor is not the result of complete reconciliation. It is the result of restraint. Reports suggest both King Charles and Prince William understand the catastrophic consequences public conflict could bring during such a fragile moment for the monarchy. The institution is already navigating enormous pressure concerns surrounding the king's health, growing public scrutiny, and the wider debate over whether the crown can remain relevant in a rapidly changing Britain. Insiders claim that reality has forced both men into an uneasy understanding. Whatever disagreements continue behind closed doors, they cannot be allowed to erupt openly. Not now, perhaps not ever. And so the monarchy moves forward through discipline rather than resolution. Sources close to palace circles suggest Catherine continues playing a critical role in maintaining that delicate balance. While tensions may have softened publicly, insiders whisper that unresolved emotions still linger beneath the surface of royal life. Different interpretations describe the Princess of Wales as one of the few figures capable of stabilizing conversations before they drift toward confrontation. Her calm presence, restraint, and instinct for preserving institutional harmony reportedly remain essential in preventing emotional fractures from widening further. Royal commentators have quietly warned, however, that history offers sobering lessons about royal reconciliations built more on necessity than healing. The House of Windsor has survived internal crises before, but many of those wounds never truly disappeared. From the strained relationship between King George VI and Edward VIII to the long shadow cast by the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage, the monarchy has often relied on silence and performance to preserve itself publicly while private scars remained buried beneath generations of protocol. That is why some observers believe the current peace inside the royal family feels so emotionally complex. It is not triumphant, it is cautious, controlled, almost fragile, because beneath every carefully managed appearance remains the unresolved question that first triggered the tension between Charles and William. What should the monarchy become after this reign eventually ends? King Charles reportedly remains committed to protecting the traditions and ceremonial identity he believes give the crown its meaning. Prince William, meanwhile, still appears determined to prepare the institution for a future shaped by modern expectations, transparency, and public accountability. Those differences have not disappeared. If anything, insiders claim they have merely been placed temporarily behind the larger priority of preserving stability while the king continues facing ongoing health challenges. And perhaps that is the deepest tragedy quietly unfolding inside the House of Windsor. The monarchy demands emotional sacrifice from the very people born to sustain it. Personal fears become private burdens. Frustrations are buried beneath ceremony. Even moments of reconciliation often carry the weight of obligation rather than emotional freedom. According to royal historians, that has always been the paradox of the crown. The institution survives precisely because individuals surrender parts of themselves to protect it. Nowhere is that contradiction more visible than in the relationship between Charles and William. A father determined to secure his reign while time grows increasingly uncertain. A son preparing for responsibilities he may inherit won over and on than expected. Both trapped by duty. Both carrying the immense pressure of protecting an institution larger than either of them individually. And all while the world watches every movement, searching for signs of weakness beneath the royal facade. For the public, the image remains reassuring. The monarchy still stands. The crown still projects continuity. The House of Windsor continues moving forward beneath centuries of history and tradition. But according to those closest to the institution, survival now depends less on perfect harmony and more on maintaining the illusion of it long enough to weather the storm ahead. Because inside the House of Windsor, peace is rarely permanent, and the battle over legacy never truly ends. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.